Welcome back to Power Play. We're continuing our coverage this evening of the war in the Middle East. News tonight that Hamas has freed 2 additional hostages, bringing the total number of freed hostages to 4. Defense Minister Bill Blair is with us live right now from the foyer of the House of Commons to talk more about the war unfolding in the Middle East. Minister Blair, good to have you with us. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Vassy.
And Minister, are there any negotiations underway to free any potential Canadian hostages?
Well, I can tell you there are currently 2 Canadians who are missing, and we are concerned about their safety. There has been discussion in the region, but also with some allied countries in the region who have been helpful for us to try to identify where those missing people are, and so that we can get them returned safely.
The minister had said, coming up now on 2 weeks ago, I believe, that there was a team of hostage experts, Canadian hostage experts, headed over to the region. Can you provide any specificity around that and any confirmation that they are there participating in whatever is going on to try and free hostages writ large?
Well, I can certainly speak to the Canadian Armed Forces deployments that we've made both into Israel and into neighboring countries. We've sent over some people with a great deal of expertise who are helping to identify and examine all of the intelligence and information with respect to locating those missing Canadians, but also participating as well in supporting the effort to repatriate those who have been taken hostage. There are very many people that we are very concerned about their safety, and certainly for the Canadians in the region, that's our primary responsibility.
Are there hostage experts, though, per se, Canadian who work with the federal government who are over there, or are they more general Canadian Armed Forces resources?
No, we've sent people over with very specific skills with respect to intelligence gathering, to analyzing the evidences before us, and who bring a great deal of expertise. There's a number of really important skill sets that the Canadian Armed Forces can bring to these discussions and their special operations. And so yes, they are currently deployed in the region and working very closely with local authorities and our allies as well.
Has anything been conveyed to you, Minister, or anyone in the government that would help explain why these 4 individuals versus anyone else have been freed?
No, we've not. That information has not been shared with us to this point. But at the same time, we're very grateful that there have been some progress made in the repatriation and the return of some of those who have been taken hostage. But we remain very, very concerned for those who remain missing, and are working very diligently to effect their safe return.
Minister, late Saturday night, you put out a news release confirming what the U.S. had said 4 days prior, which is that you did not believe, based on a CAF examination, that Israel was behind the hospital blast in Gaza City that took place last week. Did you and your team examine any evidence outside what the U.S. based its own conclusions on?
Yes, ma'am. It was very much an independent and objective investigation by Canadian Armed Forces members and our intelligence unit at CAF to look at, first of all, the open source data, but also that was available to us, but also some classified material. They analyzed, for example, the bomb blast site and the impact on adjacent buildings. They looked at the trajectory of munitions. And they did come to a conclusion in which they expressed a high degree of confidence that missile did not originate from Israel, and the much more likely scenario was that it had actually been fired from Gaza. And frankly, that was also consistent with again, the intelligence that had been shared by our allies. But I think it was important to Canadians, Vassy, that a trusted source, a Canadian source, would conduct an independent and objective examination of all of that evidence and put forward their findings, and we did that on Saturday. And I think Canadians can trust the findings of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I think they were looking to our officials to be able to verify the facts.
Am I to interpret for that you had your own, that Canada had its own intelligence outside of intelligence supplied by the United States that helped determine what you ended up determining?
And what I can tell you is that there was an independent analysis of the open source, because we had photographs and images of the blast site. We also had obtained tracking for the munitions, the incoming munitions that took place at that time and in that place. But as well, there was other classified material, and I'm not going to get into the details of that classified material that Canadian officials had access to all of that informed the conclusion that they came to.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not asking you to reveal any kind of state secrets. What I'm essentially trying to ascertain is why the U.S. was able to come to a conclusion 4 days prior to your government. I understand the analysis of open source data. That data was available for the U.S. to analyze as well. They obviously had intelligence that they based their conclusions on. If they shared that intelligence with you earlier, again, I'm curious as to what took so long to come to the exact same conclusion they were able to 4 days prior.
Well, I can tell you, Vassy, I think it was very important that Canada conduct its own analysis of that open source data and that intelligence, and that we came to a conclusion which was made by Canadian officials based on our analysis. And listen, I have great respect for the work that the United States did, as well as our French allies. They also released a statement, also by their military. But I think it was very important for Canadians to have faith in the findings of that analysis, that it had to be done independently and objectively by the Canadian Armed Forces. That was the work we undertook at the direction of the Prime Minister, and that was the information that we released on Saturday. When was that conclusion shared with the Prime Minister? I actually briefed the Prime Minister late on Saturday afternoon.
The Prime Minister made a comment very shortly after that blast at the hospital, saying that the news coming out of Gaza is absolutely unacceptable. International humanitarian and international law needs to be respected in this and in all cases. The Foreign Affairs Minister, not long thereafter, wrote on Twitter, "Bombing a hospital is an unthinkable act, and there is no doubt that doing so is absolutely illegal." Why is that tweet still up, given the conclusion you arrived at on Saturday?
Listen, I think both the Prime Minister and our Global Affairs Minister were expressing their concern for innocent civilian lives on both sides of that border, whether it be Israeli lives or Palestinian lives. We're always concerned about the impact of hostilities on innocent civilians, and certainly those comments, and I think if you look at them objectively, do not in any way attribute blame, because we didn't have that information at the time. It was simply expressing concern for those innocents who had lost their life. It was also then very important, and the Prime Minister asked that I would have the Canadian Armed Forces conduct an independent and objective review of that evidence so that we could determine exactly what happened and share that with Canadians in a format and from a source that Canadians could trust.
Is it fair, Minister, to say, though, that people should be looking at those tweets objectively, given the reaction, for example, from Jewish advocacy groups, which clearly interpreted the language around contravening international law and, quote unquote, bombing a hospital as attributing blame to Israel? And why have there not been more specific statements of clarification from both the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Prime Minister following the conclusion that you reached? Those Jewish advocacy groups felt like your government was saying Israel did this based on claims made by Hamas, and very little effort, they claim, has been made to clarify that since. Will it be?
Well, and I'm here in front of you now, Vassy, and I'm clarifying that. Our analysis
Why isn't the
of all
Prime
of the
Minister, with
evidence,
respect, Minister, why isn't the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister is the one who directed me to ensure that objective review and investigation took place. And after I briefed the Prime Minister, he asked me to release that to the public. And again, in a format, I did that on Saturday, that Canadians could see. There was no attribution made by any member of our government, and certainly not by the Prime Minister, concluding, because we just simply didn't have the information. I think there was a very understandable and human reaction to the tragic loss of innocent civilian lives on either side of that border. But it was also important that we then dig into the evidence and be able to advise Canadians what we actually believed happened here. I understand, by the way, and I have many friends, and I've talked to many friends in the Jewish community and in the Palestinian and Muslim community in Canada. People are very concerned, and I understand that concern. Frankly, we share both sides' concern with the impact of that. First of all, the terrible terrorist attack on Israel, the lives that were lost, and the terrible crimes that were committed there, and then additionally, in the impact that this will have, those hostilities could have on innocent civilians, and we continue to call for respect for all international and humanitarian law, and we are providing a lot of support, about $60 million worth of support, to humanitarian relief efforts for those people who are impacted in this conflict.
And I certainly take that point, Minister, and the work that you did in the investigation of this. But do you really expect Canadians watching tonight to believe that Minister Joly, when she said bombing a hospital is an unthinkable act, and there's no doubt that doing so is absolutely illegal, that she meant maybe Hamas is bombing its own hospital? Do you really think that that was what she was intimating in that tweet?
Well, and again, I think what she was reacting to was a lot of innocent people lost their lives in that explosion, and she was expressing concern about that. It was then incumbent upon us to, and frankly, the task was given to me, to have an analysis done by the Canadian Armed Forces. They have a great deal of expertise on the impact of those munitions and mapping their trajectory, and we had access to classified materials so that we could tell Canadians with a high degree of confidence, this is what happened.
Okay, Minister, I know you're out of time. I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vassy.